Hi, I'm Michelle. This is my so-called handmade life. I have a blog by the same name, and I am my so-called handmade life on Instagram and Mamatronic on Ravelry. There's a Ravelry group for my so-called handmade life, and I haven't been super active starting threads and things in there. I told y'all from the beginning when I started a group that I was already a moderator in another group, and then I moderate certain events in another one, and so I didn't know how active I could be, but it's a place that's there to talk about whatever's discussed here, and other people comment on things in these episodes, and so you can chat back and forth with them there or in the YouTube comments. So always, please feel free to comment here in YouTube, on the Ravelry thread for the episode, and in my blog where I have embedded posts, embedded episodes. So, sorry, I'm still dealing with something. I think what it is an allergy reaction to where I live. The climate and I don't know, maybe the refinery in my backyard. I wanted to say one other thing. Oh yeah, in the Ravelry group, I don't talk about everything discussed in the group, just if it pertains to the episode thread. So be aware, if you comment, I will probably discuss your comment or at least mention something you've said, because you help determine where the conversation goes in this podcast. This is a knitting podcast, but I talk about all kinds of stuff, as you'll see. And I've slowed down a little with my knitting because of my wrists, so it's just a lot of other things too. I hope you've had a good month. The beginning of summer now. I guess today's June 2nd. So I have been kind of absent here because I've just been resting. I got something I thought, it was like a cold, but it lasted for a month, and I'm still kind of dealing with it. So I'm thinking it's a little something more chronic, like allergies. But we were busy doing that and redoing the flooring in our house. We put in vinyl planks that should snap together, fit in the groove, and you snap it together and they make it look really easy in all the videos. It really wasn't that easy. And we thought, well, maybe we went at it from the wrong direction. But when we did another part of the house, we tried the other way. It was still difficult. A lot of it involved just hard tapping, to get things in place, and I really couldn't do all of that. So I busied myself with other things. Like at the beginning of 2018, I talked about deep cleaning my house, and I had a lot of things papers and memories and furniture and things of my grandparents. So I went through the last of all of their paperwork, and it's been like 2 years since my grandmother passed away. So, it was time, but it wasn't painful because it was, it's been a while, and it was really sweet to see where she had saved. Even when she went to assisted living, she had to downsize her belongings, but she saved a stack of cards that I had given her over the years, that my kids had given, that my brother, my uncle, and my grandfather. So it was nice to see all those things. And so what I have is one Rubbermaid tub, yay big, full of photos to be scanned. Some of the photos and albums are mine too, so it's family stuff to be scanned. And that's it, or displayed. And so I feel so good about getting that done. And so even though I couldn't knit, which is like my little pastime and kind of calming hobby, I was involved in doing something that would, help maintain peace or create order in my home. So that was nice. And when I went through my grandmother's things, I just kind of grabbed some of the things that I've, let me turn my phone off. Some of the things that I've been doing, I just went through the house and grabbed some of it to show you. This is some of the writings, I found my grandmother had little verses, this was her verse of the day. And so she would write it out, and then she would put it out somewhere where she could see it. I had it stuck to my fridge. You're going through papers, and a lot of it is medical bills and instructions from the doctor on how to take this combination of medications or something, and it's dry stuff that's just, ugh, you don't want to keep all that. But then there's all these things that are special and meaningful and you do want to keep. You can't keep it all. But I thought one of my goals for 2019 that I haven't worked on is improving my memory. So specifically memorizing things like verses, things that would give me boldness or encourage me. But I also wanted to work on just improving overall memory of things and writing down memories of things in the past. So as I was organizing my home, I found all of the these folders where I kept keepsakes from family vacations and a journal that I would keep with each vacation. I pretty much did that with every trip I went on with my husband and children. And I go through now and I read them, and the last time I read them, I remembered everything I was reading. I don't remember much of it now. And I'm thinking, why did my memory dramatically drop like this? Hormone imbalances can do that. Estrogen dominance, a foggy memory is a really common thing. And that could be part of it because I still have that issue I'm dealing with. It's evidenced in skin and headaches and things. But I also heard this thing, I think it was Mayim Bialik, is that how you say her name? She was Blossom. She talked about, since we got our smartphones, we have this thing called Google Brain, and studies have shown that because we know we can always Google it, we actually retain less information than any generation before. Even though we have all of the information at our fingertips, we're retaining less. Maybe I have Google Brain. That might be what my issue is. So I kind of wanted to undo that. Not have as many things vying for my attention. And my question for you last week was, how are you dealing with just too much internet stress? The stress can vary what stresses you, but in general, I think we have to know what's going on, but knowing what's happening in the world is stressful still. I mean, at some point we might have to protect ourselves from watching. If you watch news 24 hours a day, which a lot of the older people I know do that, you are going to be, ready to blow your top maybe. So anyway, I thought I can start here with memorizing and use some things my grandmother was using to improve her memory before she passed away. And it was kind of a sweet thing to find, so I wanted to show you. Oh, I also wanted to show you something else I did when there was work that really I couldn't do. Laying the flooring in tight spaces, too many people is not helpful. It's just not. So I let my husband do that, and I would do organizing around the house. I'm looking for my little notes here. And one of the things I did was I have this poster-sized photo I blew up of my grandfather. I put this on Instagram. This is him in the Army. He was in the cavalry, and at Fort Bliss is where this was taken. This is when he had first joined up. It was in a really crummy poster frame. It's still in a poster frame because it's really big, but it's a nicer poster frame with a real edging, like wood edging, or wood look edging at least, and I made a mat for it. So before I had it like taped to the center of a poster board with the look of matting, but this is a real matting, but it's still just poster board matting. So it's not like the greatest job ever, don't look too close, but I really like it. And it doesn't like sag, and it's not all misshapen, because the other one, over the years, it looks kind of rough. Then I have one of those folding screens that you may have seen from the 80s and 90s. A lot of people had them in their home. It's like room divider that's got like 15 frames for photos. And they're kind of one of those cheesy things you've seen a ton. But I love mine. Someone gave it to me when we were a young family, and we just had my son. And so I filled it with photos of that time, most of them taken in the same day. And I used my Minolta, it's like black and white film, and just really special. Well, it was also just photos taped into the center of a piece of off-white paper, like resume paper, or something a little heavy. And that paper had yellowed over the years. It just didn't look good. So I noticed that like 2 years ago. But life was a little more busy at that point, and so I ordered the stuff to make real matting for those frames, and I just didn't take the time to do it until now, but it seemed right. Everything's torn up in the house anyway. Why not make a bigger mess? So one day when no one would need the kitchen, I went in there and I had ordered this, like I said, 2 years ago, a beveled edge mat cutter. I guess that's what you would call it. I got gallery tape to hang the photos, to tape them to the matting. And then this is a messy one. This is just a practice one. But I got mat board. And so buying all of this, like, this is enough mat board. I did 15, and I had a couple of messy practice ones, and I still have all these left. These are just 8 by 10 size, but my photos were 3 by 5. So buying all of this plus a self-healing cutting surface was so much cheaper than getting matting for this. It's just a cool little DIY that's much easier to do, and if you have several things around your house you would like to mat all at once, I suggest doing this and just make a day of it. It's a little hard on your fingers to cut it, but I could do it with wrist issues, so you can do it too. And I might put in some photos of that. I think I did have some on Instagram. So my son-in-law graduated, and that was exciting. We went and saw that. It's really cool. They all jump in the river. I might have said that already, the last episode. They all jump in the river and just kind of float away after graduation. I thought that was a neat tradition to have. Okay, so we redid our flooring, and like, I talk a lot here about doing things yourself and an affordable way to do things. It's not that I think cheapest is always best, right? One thing that a lot of you have impressed upon me or share with me is we're trying to do things that are better, better for our lives, the people around us, communities, and the world. So I don't do everything perfectly that way, but the flooring looks really good. The only problem is we found out that both of our dogs struggle to stand upright on it. I just underestimated how much they use their claws to stay upright in the wood flooring. And so, slippery as I thought that was, this vinyl plank is way slipperier, and it has texture to it, but they stand on it and their front and back legs just kind of separate. So after a week of this, 2 weeks of it, I noticed my old dog Spot was limping around, and he looked like he was in pain. I had recently gotten him steps, which those of you who follow me on Instagram have probably seen. A lot of people gave advice on things to give your dog for aches and pains, arthritis, and getting them to use the steps. And he actually started using them on his own. Like, I didn't have to force him anymore because he was hurting. And so I was worried, but the vet gave me some things for him, and she said, well, let's just give him this rounds of these 2 things and we'll see if he just kind of had a bad spill because he was getting used to the flooring. And I had put yoga mats all through my house. So basically we have this flooring that I feel like it looks so nice and orderly, and it matches through the house, and finally, people could walk into my home at any time and it wouldn't be chaos. And then it's covered in neon yoga mats. I had so many mats I could teach a class easily. It looked terrible, but he was walking better, so we went and got a bunch of rugs. And some of you on Instagram recommended some ideas. Flor, FLOR.com was one that a couple of you recommended and said that you can taste tiles, individual floor tiles, and you piece them together to make a rug size or a carpet, a room, and you can pull each individual tile up and wash it if there's a stain or something. And you know how dogs and cats always throw up on your carpet. That would be really handy. But I went to the site and I priced like a 5x7 rug, and it was like $400. But they have great styles. I love so many of the designs they have for flooring. So I went to Ross and I got these kind of things, little throw rugs. I could probably throw this in the washing machine. I got like 12 of them to go, runners and stuff to go all through the house. I was walking out and I couldn't see over the stack of them, and you know you can't take your cart out of Ross because I guess people do what's truly cart jacking there. But anyway, it looks better, and it was a solution for our little old guy. And he's back to just walking like a normal senior dog and not quite so limping and pitiful. So in this time, I didn't do a lot of knitting. And the last episode, I didn't have a whole lot of knitting to show. It was faster, like it was a quick episode. I was in a hurry, and that really loaded up so much easier. I think that's what I need to try for. So let's see. Did I tell you about this picture? You know what? I wanted to tell you the story of this. I'm glad I wrote it down. It's on my Instagram, but not everyone's on Instagram. This photo, I told you, was my grandfather in the Army, and he had dementia before he passed away, and the last Christmas that he was able to come to spend with us at our house. They used to always have Christmas at their house, but eventually my grandmother was just like, she was hinting, oh, this is too hard. But she really still wanted it there. She wanted to host it, but eventually she was like, I can't. So I said, I'll do it, totally. But it's going to be a little less traditional, but we can do it. And he came over, and, during meals when someone has dementia, they start to kind of recede out of the conversation. It's too hard to keep up with what's going on. And it's sometimes there's confusion about who's talking and who everyone is. The longer they've known you, usually the longer they remember you, but that's not always the case. So he would just kind of fade back. But he enjoyed it. He really always, just anytime my children were around, he was smiling and expectantly when they started talking. You could see this expectant smile on his face, like they're going to make me laugh or they're going to make me happy. I always loved that. I mean, at the worst of times in the hospital, he was that way. So we go through dinner, and my children are really good about, always have been, about including their grandparents and kind of letting the grandparents come to the forefront of the conversation. Try not to talk too fast, try not to talk too high where people can't hear. And but he was excluded quite a bit because he didn't know how to jump in the conversation. He just couldn't follow it. So after dinner, everyone moves into the living room to sit down, and as he walked in, he saw that photo and he said, "That's me at Fort Bliss on my horse." And I said, "Yeah, do you remember your horse's name?" He said, R992. He could totally remember all of that. And he had some stories to go along with the horse and being in the Army. And we were so delighted to just get to see him grasp onto something and be able to share it. And he was the best storyteller I've ever known. And even toward the end, especially if they were about his early life, he could tell stories that still great storytelling. Still, I'm so grateful to have heard them. Many of them we have recorded, but not all. Anyway, that photo is extra special to me, not just because it's so cool, and it was taken by a journalist who was traveling with him. And she did some other really neat photos. So you have old photos, but then you have some that are extra cool. That's a pretty cool one. But it's extra special to me because it was a moment that allowed him to be present with us and communicate to us at a time where it was harder for him to communicate. So it's just extra special. And I was thrilled to make it look a little better on the little picture rail that I have. Okay, I did lots of talk about not knitting stuff. Let's talk about some knitting stuff. I've worked to kind of get some headway, make some headway on old projects. So one thing I did was, I have my sock blocker here. I'm almost done with my second Gingerbread House Jinx yarn colorway. This is my Afterthought heel. That's where it's going to go. I'm almost to the toe in that. Here's the other one that I finished already. It still has ends, you know, unwoven, but I left them because if I have enough pink yarn, I might go and add some to each toe. I'm not sure. See, I did the pink on the cuff and the heel. This was in a kit that Laura had for just tonal that matched her gingerbread house. And I might do just pink here on the toe of each one. So I have to see how much of the pink I'll have left. But I worked on that, and it was at that point, the last time I showed it, I was right about here on the first sock. And you know, I don't feel confident doing a heel during a movie. I still have to look at my instructions because it's been a while since I did Box of Socks, and that was my first year to really do them. So I don't have it all memorized. I'm using the Susan B. Anderson Smooth Operator pattern. But one thing I keep forgetting to do, she has one for rounded corners of the heel instead of these little square corners. I keep forgetting to do it. And I keep forgetting to put in the rounded toe. I prefer the rounded toe over this squared off Kitchener stitch. So next time I'll remember that. I have to remember. But anyway, it's no big deal. So progress on that finally. I needed to get these things off the needles then. I was about here on my Kia socks the last time I showed you. But what I did was I totally went back and ripped them out to the cuff and started over. What I did, this is John Henderson's Kia pattern, and it was inspired by a conversation on racism. So you see little equality signs, equal signs around it. It's a great kind of vanilla-like stitch pattern, but it's not as boring as just straight stockinette. And what I saw, a lot of them were done kind of short, and they looked a little slouchy. They probably aren't on the foot, but to me they look cute, like something you would wear with clogs or sandals, so that are meant to have socks under them. So I thought I'll try doing a larger needle, like she suggested a size 2. I think it was 0 for the cuff and 2. So I thought, well, maybe that's a design element, you know, a slightly looser fit, but it was really huge on me. I'm a very loose knitter, and then with, you know, wrist tension, strain, I definitely am not trying to be tight and tense. So I just ripped back to the cuff I did in 0, and I used zeros to complete it. So this is the Monica's Apartment colorway by Mockingbird Fiber Company, and they have a podcast also that's I think it's called Mockingbird Fiber Podcast. They have some really great colorways. I have a few more skeins of things from them that I want to get to using. They've got a really good tweed base, and they'll do it in tonal colors, and I really love tonal tweed yarn. So I did get one. When they have like something that's just kind of a one-off, I think they call it Oddbirds, and I got one in a green color. I'm excited to use it for something. Maybe I'll try and do make up a pattern, kind of like Adina did in our Wing It cow. I'd like to do something a little more creative with it. So anyway, progress. I'm ready for the heel on this sock. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice, so I sound like that guy. Didn't he play Mr. Drucker in an old TV show? Was it Petticoat Junction or something? I don't know. His voice wobbled. That's what I'm doing. Sorry. Let me see here. So here's something I definitely did finish. I still have ends to weave in. And guys, this was a total sick brain knitting. Almost the whole thing. I've just been way out of it. This is Libby Johnson's Dirty Lace wrap, and you can wear it like a shawl, but it's also scarf-like. And I haven't blocked it yet. It's going to block out larger. and I want a little more length. I like a long scarf. Also, as a shawl, I would want it a little, as much length as it can give me. So I used 4 colors of Tosh Moh Light, which has a lot of mohair in it, and it's hard when you make mistakes and have to rip back, and I did make mistakes in the beginning. Like, this is my cast on edge. It is very loose. Maybe you can't tell, it's kind of loose and sloppy. If you compare it to the bind off edge, I think this one's a lot nicer. I was learning my stitch pattern, and this lace stitch isn't difficult, but being sick, I had a fever like through the first 2 colors. I made 100 mistakes. I had to go back, change my needle size, take a break because my wrists were hurting too at the time. And you can see it's kind of extra bumpy and lumpy. But I really love it. I was also supposed to work in a 3rd color here. I didn't read the directions well. Basically, every type of stitch pattern that she had, I did do it. I just did it in the wrong places. I did the color order the wrong way. And then once I had it wrong, I had to kind of change the rest of the order to make sure I had enough to finish with the same color I started with. So she's having a knit along for this, and a lot of really pretty finished objects. And I like seeing how people sometimes go for neutrals or really bright contrasty colors, or some that have like a theme to them, and others it's just like, this is what I had. And they put it together and it works so well, but it gives it a whole different feel. When the colors totally blend from one to another, to me it has a different look than, say, this. This is really funky to me. I wasn't even sure if I liked these 2 colors together, and I was questioning. You know, I wasn't very far through it, but I just wasn't sure. And I sat down to work on it on my picnic blanket outside, and I noticed the blanket was some of these same colors, pretty much these colors, and I realized I really like the blanket, and it is kind of funky. It's meant to look kind of like a Mexican blanket, like you would buy at a market. But it's I liked it because the colors were funkier. They were different than the usual Southwest colors you see, and I thought, you know, if I like this color combo, then that's what I like. So I stuck with it, and I'm glad I did. It looks really good. I'm getting that husky voice. When I get this, I can do Norah Jones impersonations really well. Don't even have to try, and I have that cool, throaty, jazzy sound. So I asked you guys, we were talking about being stressed out by the internet, news, social media, stuff like that. And I asked you guys what you're doing to sort of protect yourself. Set up a barrier. How do you filter? How do you handle it? Because I had been a little overwhelmed. I go through spells where I won't watch the news, and then I will. And I find my blood pressure raises. I'm on edge a little more. I'm dissatisfied if I spend too much time doing it. I feel that I've done something to harm myself. Obviously, I don't want to be completely in the dark about things. And Instagram was never a part of that, but it is, like most social media now, it is a place where political things are discussed, and some of that's for the better, but it's still, I need to limit it. And I talked some in the last episode about when it's not really a discussion about values and what's happening, when it might start that way, but it starts to become like a angry bickering between people, just kind of bashing and shaming people for the sake of shaming them, and why we do it. So that was in the last episode, but I asked you guys, so what are you doing to kind of protect yourself from that? And a lot of you have some of the same ideas as me as far as limiting it. I think Sarah Jane had said, and also A. Eastman, commenting in 2 different places, had said that people speak differently person to person. And I'd mentioned that in the last episode, that we tend to behave differently when we see the effects of what we do on the people. So say if you are shaming someone publicly, and in general that doesn't sound good, it's a very negative thing. However, picketing is shaming someone. I mean, there's some sense of shaming to a lot of how we as people affect our peers and get changes in the world. So we get a company to stop, harming its employees sometimes by shaming them. Today, people affect change by having sponsors pull away from some broadcast for something they've done or from a company. So I'm not saying it's always bad or anything, but it is shaming, and traditionally people would see the effects of the shaming. Anyway, listen to the last episode if you're interested in that. And I have links and stuff. Always there's links in the the description box on the blog, on the blog or in the podcast thread in my Ravelry group. So A. Eastman, Sarah Jane, and Ada had said, yeah, when you see the effects of your words and your actions on someone, it changes what you might say. Sometimes there's things you just wouldn't say if you were right face to face with someone. Another thing that Sarah Jane had mentioned is that because social media is not the best platform for certain kinds of discussions, you can't see what a person means. You just can't always gather their meaning from them. And that's true, and I'm going to talk a little about what someone else I was listening to this week, what they had to say about that, Jenny Odell. So Sarah also limits her internet viewing and also her kids because they tend to get cranky with too much TV or internet. And I noticed that when my children were young, they didn't really get on the internet. We had one central computer in our house, and they didn't have smartphones until they were pretty old. So for them it was video games or TV. And if they watched too much of it, we would all kind of fall into this malaise, And I remember my son sometimes would have free time in the summer, no homework. He could play a longer amount of time of games, and he would stop himself and say, I need some outside time. He would go outside and do something. And I liked that he could note in himself the change, too much, I'm sick from this. Little Kitten also tries to limit toxic anything. So if it's people in her life, people around her, if it's social media, news, whatever, she definitely limits her exposure to it. So that, especially if it's toxic, if it's bad. So I've stated, and hopefully I don't have to keep saying this, that difficult subjects or learning about something bad that's happening to someone, I don't call that bad. It may be hard to hear, hard to see, hard to know it's happening right around us, and it might even be convicting if we've done nothing to help, or we know there's something we could do to help and we're just waffling about should we. Difficult, but I wouldn't call it bad, However, too much difficult stuff can overwhelm anyone. I've found in those conversations about inclusivity on Instagram, people who are people of color and they're sharing their stories, they're exhausted from sharing and answering questions and feeling like, okay, I want to represent, this is my opportunity, people are listening, I need to say these things, but oh man, I'm wiped out. And then wiped out if they receive just negativity for no reason, just for the sake of being cruel. I'm just seeing lots of people in general exhausted. Though it's good information, we have to sometimes step back, right? It's important information to know the news. It's good to know what's going on in the world, but if I watch it all day, I'm not taking care of myself. I will be no good for my family. So anyway, I guess that goes without saying to you guys. But what Little Kitten said is that she doesn't always know how entrenched she is in something that's toxic until it's too late. And it's kind of got its claws in, and she's got to extricate herself from it, and that's difficult. That is the way it works. I know as far as the consumerism on social media goes, I didn't realize it was happening to me until I was knee-deep in, and I realized, wow, I got to stop seeing something and saying, ooh, I want to buy this, Louise had said that she hasn't had a lot of emotional energy lately. She has things happening in her life that are important that she needs to be present for. So she hasn't had the emotional energy to get too involved in social media things. So it would be, she didn't say, conversations that are good and important, but right now her focus is being demanded by her family somewhere else, and that is how I was for a few years. Or news in the world, you know, she can get bits and pieces here and there, but she just can't sit for the whole conversation because her life doesn't allow it right now, and she has to preserve her energy to take care of her family, herself. Katinka also has spent less time on social media because it is draining emotionally to be on it. Eventual Knit said that she can get stressed out by it, so she handles that by hiding things that just she knows this is not a good source. So there are certain people I've had to hide. That I it's not that I don't want to be friends with the person. I just have to hide their feed, say on Facebook, because it's just always so volatile, so full of anger. And I think for Eventual Knits it's similar. She hides things she knows are going to be toxic to her, just not good. And then kind of looks for a ratio. So with some social media, she's learning things, she's hearing important voices, it's good for her. But she's also balancing in things that are lighter, that like how-tos and crafting things that are uplifting and creative, to find a balance in all of the things that we can use it for. She said, if I have a 1-to-5 or higher ratio of current injustice to positive crafting, I'm doing okay. So she has her like kind of mental ratio, and she just kind of looks for that. Let's see. Annette was speaking about how toxic the shaming and piling on can be for people, and that it's really bullying. I'm not saying disagreement is bullying or dissent is bullying, but disagreement just for the sake of it, you know, or pounding on someone because they don't agree with you and you don't agree with them. She was saying it's just plain bullying and can be handled and seen the same way. But she said when you've got your whole, like, and I'm thinking children, you see all your parents and adults doing that. That's what they do online, and you see your influences and your political figures doing that. What are we expecting of the next generation? Those are her thoughts, but I'm adding to it, thinking from the perspective of a child. We're not really setting them up for the skills of how to filter things and how to step back when you need to, which I'm going to talk about that, some ideas I got from someone about stepping away from stuff, even good stuff or important things. And I don't know, those were interesting thoughts that we're seeing influencers and authority figures doing it. Won't the rest of the country here in the States follow suit? Ada isn't even really on Instagram much, but she's not really into social media, so it's not really an issue so much for her. But she does do YouTube quite a bit. And I guess YouTube, depending on what you follow, YouTube isn't such an issue for me unless I'm doing news on YouTube, and then it's an issue. Let's see, Sarah had said that she hasn't done as much social media since she had issues with her wrists. And, you know, when you can't knit, it's really hard to watch knitting stuff because it makes you antsy to do it. Any kind of craft or hobby, if you can't do it, oh, it stinks to see all about it and hear about others doing it when you can't take part. So she just kind of backed away from that, and she started doing exercise more and things, and she's just limited it naturally that way because of injury. And she also asked if that chair that I had in the last episode with my big dog was laying on it asleep. She's not supposed to be on the furniture, by the way. She was moving and running in her sleep. She asked if that's an heirloom. It is. It was my grandfather. I showed the picture of him. It was his mother's. was given to her by her church. She worked in the church nursery for, I don't know, 50 years. I mean, just some crazy amount of time rocking babies. And so they gave her a rocking chair for her little retirement celebration. And I got it, and it had a split in the fabric, and I had it recovered with vintage like fabric. I love it. It went really well with my furniture. So it's really beautiful. But if you look at the back of it, it's destroyed by cat claws. So at some point I just knew there's no fixing this. This is going to have to be recovered. And it was crazy what we had to go through to get it covered really affordably. So I'm going to have to cover it myself, I think. Not ready to do it yet. So basically, I leave it there in the living room, and it's the sacrifice the cats demand. They get to destroy it. They don't touch anything else because of that. So that's sadly where that heirloom is right now. Jenny said that she has a philosophy about, or a similar philosophy to me about social media, that her priority is a sense of well-being. So if it doesn't enhance her life in some way, she just doesn't go for it. And like me, I have had my life enhanced by difficult concepts on YouTube, on Instagram. But sometimes it's the way people react within those conversations. Not so much, so I have to back away. Jessica takes frequent breaks from social media, gets very overwhelmed by hateful speech, public shaming, and she sees a lot of envy over people's lives. And that kind of falls into something Andrea said, that she noticed in social media a lot of falseness, this facade people would put up, like, oh, my life's just so perfect. And it was meant to instill envy, I guess, in others. But it's an insecurity kind of thing. And she felt less disassociated from those people, didn't enjoy it, and finally kind of axed it. Now, she does use social media for her business. For knitters, Instagram's kind of a big selling place. She does show her wares there, but she feels like she wants a balance. There's a line, a fine line, and she doesn't want to cross it. She doesn't want everything to be about commerce. She's also got her personal account and her connections she's made with people that are very personal. Julie said that she's rarely on social media, just maybe if her kids say, hey, look at this on Facebook, she'll go look at it. But she's noticed that when she does get on the media somehow, see news or something, if she sees something that's super negative or done hatefully, she will, it will totally affect her mood. She'll see her mood drop. And so she notes the influence it has on her and has to be careful of it. And she also said that sweater I talked about, Sunset Ringer Tee, it made her think of something, and when I said it looked like an old Ocean Pacific OP t-shirt from the 80s, she was like, yes, that is exactly what it made her think of, because she had those too. Pammy said that she's seen a lot of the pile-on and the negativity, the way people are talking ugly and hateful to one another. She's had to unfollow some accounts because of it. Let's see, Stacy said that as she gets older, she's needing to focus on a life that's simpler and filled with people and things she loves. So when social media becomes toxic, she has to back away from it or not participate in those areas. She wants things that bring calmness to her world. Now, I don't know how. Everybody's probably different. Most people would say that's what they want, but what brings each of us calm is different. I mean, for some people who feel like they are suffering from an injustice right now, it might calm them to talk about it. For others, it's knowing what the people, like I've had friends online who I didn't realize some of the things they were going through, but they've shared it now. You don't know you want to know somebody's problems until you hear their problems, but then I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't want to go back to not knowing what they're going through. So that brings calmness to me. Not at first. Like I said, it's difficult, but in the end it's going a good place. It's difficult to see someone you care about suffer. There's a bug in here. But it's important. Like, I wouldn't want to not be by their side while they're going through it. So what a thing to navigate, right? We have to constantly be aware. Like Little Kitten said, she's not aware of what it's doing to her until it's done. We have to constantly be aware. Lori said that as a teacher, she's noticed the effect of social media in families, and she's seen like one of the calmest, most present of mind mothers in the class does not engage in social media at all. And she wonders what the effect on home life is for children, for parents. And she wonders if that not engaging on social media is part of what's giving that mother the focus and the calm that she needs. Also, Lori wants a suggestion from us. She's just had carpal tunnel surgery, and so she hasn't knitted since January. She's wanting to follow doctor's orders, start back carefully. Any ideas on projects that would be good for her wobbly wrists, things that wouldn't tax her, leave those. Now, I know she's looked at comments from last week where, or maybe the last 2 episodes where I talked about my wrist pain. So there's those things, but specifically pattern ideas. Please, guys, leave her some pattern ideas in the comments. Brooke had said Instagram used to be her escape when she was stressed out by things in life that were happening, but sometimes it actually becomes a source of stress depending on what she's reading or where it leads with other people. And so she knows there's certain accounts she can go to for what she needs at the moment. And I like the idea of picking and choosing at times. Some days I feel ready to know what's happening. Other days I'm hurting for some reason and I need uplifting, and I know who I can go to for a little uplift. Right off the top of my head, I think of Dana, Yards of Happiness. Her family life, her dog life, always brings a smile, and she's usually up at the top of my stories, so I'm seeing those doggy faces every time I get on Instagram, and it's always a little something, like a little juice that gets me through another few minutes. I always appreciate that. There are people you can go to for various things, and that's a smart way to look at it. It's kind of like Eventual Knits with her ratio, just kind of balance it out. Adina had said something that really fits with something I want to talk about later, that during the last election, she was so stressed out by the stuff she was seeing from people she knew on Facebook, just angry and hateful back and forth and fighting, and then the news was difficult. There's always difficult things happening in the world. She actually had to quit taking a newspaper, and she quit watching the news. She just went to actually somebody also commented they don't even have a TV because they just don't do social media or don't do the news. They get some news online and they just limit their immersion in it. I'm sorry, I don't remember who that was. Adina said that her family, they had to take a step back from all the media and even people she knew, which is tough. She's dreading the next election cycle. I am too. I know that's part of why I've been thinking about this lately. I feel it start my stomach basically knots up for a year. This is not healthy. And I was talking with my husband about someone we know. They don't care. They just don't care. And I'm like, how can you not care? But they're probably really chill. You know, they may not vote, but they're really chill. She was talking about how some of this public shaming can have a constructive side to it, which I mentioned is true. But there's also that mob mentality that's not good. People are very emboldened to say destructive things on the internet. They can hide behind the technology, just like kids bullying one another. They feel like it's anonymous. All very true. So, where does this leave me? Well, I've just taken a lot of time recently thinking about I've seen my summer as a time to have a retreat for myself, like my retreat with God. I just want to hear from him. I want to be calm. I want to get ready. I don't feel prepared. I don't know exactly what for. It may just be like, look, I've had this cold thing going for over a month, so my body's not in tip-top shape. My migraines, I thought I had it all worked out with the doctor and medicines. Nope. The last 2 months, they've been way unpredictable. My medicine works eventually, but it would be really hard if, say, I feel the need to go back to work, which I might. I just feel a lot of things that potentially pulling me, like maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that, and I'd like to feel ready. I would like to feel like I was in tip-top shape as much as I can be at this point in my life. So, as I consider that, I've thought about my mental well-being, what I expose myself to. If I don't have a lot of free time in the day, how much of it do I want to go to information and sometimes misinformation that's not so great for me? I'm going to take a little break and show you some knitting now because this is a knitting podcast. Oh, this is the wrong side. Yeah, here we go. This is my Umnia that I was doing with the Fruity Knitting Martin Story Knit Along. I really haven't participated in chat on that at all. And it's hard to show this because the ends are curling, but this is the front piece of it. And so, no, I'm sorry, this is the back, but you can see how the neck will go. It's got raglan shaping. The whole sweater is knit in pieces. I'll show you what it looks like. It's a really nice design. It's made for cotton and linen. Or maybe it was wool cotton. It's a Rowan yarn. But I just felt like it was not very airy. And for me, if it's not airy in the summer and made with some very lightweight material, I wouldn't wear it in the summer. I can't see wearing this in the summer. maybe in a cold movie theater. So I just went ahead and used Wool of the Andes Sport Weight. And so you can see I've got my front here. The design is not coming out as clearly to me. But maybe when I block it, it will. Actually, you know, when I stretch it out a little, I do see all the little purl lines. Anyway, it's a really interesting stitch pattern. And you can also see that my gauge got kind of floppy in here where I was struggling with my wrists. I knit this wrong. If you feel like, oh, I'm such a noob, I can never do something like that, I make so many mistakes, I just want you to know that mistakes are like equal opportunity. I make them constantly. I make the doofiest mistakes of anyone I know. I do it all still, and I've been knitting like for 17 years or something. You don't, right here at the beginning of the raglan decrease, you don't decrease too rapidly, but then all of a sudden you go to every other row. I didn't see that, and I did this not so rapid decrease, and it went on and on and on, and I'm going to the right number of stitches, and finally this piece was like, instead of being this tall, it was like way here. I was like, how am I supposed to, grow up and fit in this? There's no way. The beginning of the raglan arm is down at my hip. This is crazy. But, I just kept doing it until I got the right number of stitches here. It was bizarre. It was so misshapen. And then I went back and read the pattern. I was like, oh, yeah. So never feel foolish, because whatever foolish thing you've done, I've done it more times than you. This Rowan number 63 it's like one of the spring summer issues, and they have, like, you can see kind of cotton and linen-y yarns. It's got some really good sweaters. Even if you wouldn't use them for summer weight, they would be great as winter weight. I love this one. When it came out, I thought, oh, I'd like to make that, but it's a pretty big time investment because it's a long coat, and I've never made a really long cardigan or a sweater coat before. That's something I really would like to do. And I have yarn I think I could use for, I think it's a Joji Locatelli pattern, a sweater coat. Not one of her super long dusters, but pretty long. This is a good one too, this brioche. I really like the way that looks. This pattern makes me think of, it looks like the reverse side of cables, and I like that look. Alina's Amber has similar super oversized cables. It's kind of like the edge sweater that I knit, but I think it has more of this look. Anyway, I do want to make that one of these days. Maybe I'll flash up a picture of it here. So there's one more I wanted to show you guys that I liked. I don't know the designers for all of these. I don't even know if I'll show. Lisa Richardson did this one. I just thought this was a great open weave type sweater project. Really nice. So anyway, my Umnia is coming along slowly but surely. I didn't want to get, I'm trying to get these projects finished. I have 6 things currently going. So I have this sweater, the very beginnings of Guthrie. I have Jane Richmond's Winston pullover. Now remember, Jane did her Winston, the first one. Then she did the second one in seed stitch, and I really liked that. So I decided to try that same hack. I don't have the neckband on, but I have finished the body. Now I may go back and lengthen this some. I just have to see how this looks after blocking. I'm on a sleeve, but basically I was held off. I had maybe enough yarn to finish it, maybe, but not 2 skeins to alternate. And I really need to alternate skeins with this because, you know, the top part is nice and kind of mixed and modeled, you know, but then it started striping. So I went in and I alternated, and it gave it a little more of a spiraled or pooled look. I don't really mind the striping look too much, but the sleeves really looked super stripy. So alternating, it doesn't look too over the top. I just wanted it to be uniform. So the beginning didn't look striped, so I didn't really want the bottom to. I love the way this looks. Let me see if I can. I just love that. So I do have that mega skein here, and there's nothing to keep me from finishing this. And this would be something I could finish before the next episode, and I probably will. I really don't like having a million things on my needles at once. So I'm trying to think what else I have. There's going to be a summer sweater knit along this year, but it's going to be really informal on the Very Shannon Ravelry group. And I want to participate. And I think I'm going to do that sunset ringer tee that I showed you last week. And I showed you I had Lion Brand Kobu, which is a cotton bamboo yarn. So this is the tee I want to do. And it has that 80s sunset Ocean Pacific look, kind of Roxy-like. This is the Kobu. I haven't started. That was to begin in June, so I guess it's already begun like yesterday. This is the contrast edging. This is a very soft, you know how bamboo has kind of a silky feel. It definitely has a bamboo feel to it. It's going to be really soft. I want mine to fit at least as, and there's the contrast. Everything's in plastic. We have really bad moths here, and doing the work we were doing on our house, our doors were open a lot. We really had moths come in. I finished Libby's Dirty Lace. She's come out with some new patterns recently. One is that textural stripe, henna, but it's turtleneck, and she did it in like an alpaca wool mix. I just hardly ever use alpaca because it's just more warmth than I need for where I live. Until I move, that's how it's going to be. But I want to do her Mindful shawl. She re-released it with the extra large dimensions. I would love to do that. She did it in kind of a dirty pink, brownish pink colorway. I really love the effect of it. To me, it counteracts some of that ultra feminine look of the lace and the picot edging and actually this isn't super frilly lace to me, but when the shawl first came out, I thought, first of all, mindful. And I'm someone who makes weird gargantuan raglan decreases. I'm not super mindful, and I thought maybe that's not for me. You really have to pay attention to do that right. And it was sort of frilly looking, and I'm kind of no nonsense like. So I didn't think it was for me, but when I saw that colorway, I thought, man, that looks good. It could, a colorway like that, something more in the brown family, could really tone that down, and I liked the way it looked because I do like the graphic appeal of those chevrons and the crisscrossing of the lace. So I have some yarn from Serendipitous Wool that I would really like to use for that. I'm just going to show you a picture of it because it's put up right now, and I've already filled this room with all kinds of stuff. So it's just a really pretty pinkish brown. I love that color. I know, I knit a lot of that. Anyway, so that's kind of what I've got going. I've moved Sunset Ringer up in the queue. I'm probably going to start casting on for it today. And I've begun the ribbing of the back piece of my Umnia. I'm excited to get back onto Guthrie. I really want to do it. I think I got caught up in other knit-alongs in my own knit-along, which, by the way, I need to grade that pattern. Talk about inclusivity. A lot of people have been discussing pattern sizing and how, and I've thought it's really hard for someone to have, to want to make something and it's not available because it doesn't fit them. There's not, you know, the size for them. And I know a lot of things are oversized right now, and while that can help, if you want the oversized fit, you still need a larger pattern. So you've probably seen the discussion happening too online. Libby is someone that I've noticed goes, I think she has quite a few sizes. I feel like 12 sizes or more. Let me see. I'm really plugging her. I'm not doing that on purpose, but if somebody provides it, they provide it. She's big on having things done in a way that women feel comfortable wearing it. Yeah, 15 sizes in her Tui. Tui is the one I want to knit that makes me think of a sweatshirt, but it's a sweater. 15 sizes, so up to a 66-inch bust. I'm impressed by that. A lot of more designers are doing that. So anyway, when I think about writing up sizing for this, that's like daunting, that's challenging, but you know, I don't have any great designs on what I do with this. I don't have any big plans. There's no expectations except that I do want to write it up. I have it written up enough that I'm going to make another one, and I showed you the colorways I want to use in sport yarn. But I want to write it up to give to everyone who entered my knit-along. But what a challenge it would be to try and make it inclusive sizing for somebody who doesn't do this for a living. So that's a challenge. That kind of excites me a little more about, because the idea of grading and sizing was like, blah, boring. So I thought, well, that kind of makes it a little more interesting to have this conversation going. It kind of spurs me on, what would it be like to not only learn to do it, but to go ahead and learn to do it for lots of women I know, for their sizes, you know? Anyway, balance, right? I told you guys I'm wanting to use the summer to I really want to make a push to get my hormones on track. Take care of whatever this issue is. If it's allergies, fine. I've been working hard at doing, I'm going to show you. I've been working hard at really feeding myself high quality food. You know, I told you I was living by that proverb for a while. It's better to eat the wrong things with the right attitude than the right things with the wrong attitude. I agree with that in general. but I gotta fix this hormone deal if I can, and I really don't want to use creams and hormone therapy. So, and it may just be like a lot of women have said, your migraines will go away when you hit the change, so maybe I need to look forward to the change, but I'm not actually. So I mean, I don't dread it either, but I don't want to wait 5 more years to find that balance. So I've been really, for the last, I don't know, month or so, trying to feed myself high quality food, lots of veggies. And when you do a lot of veggies, you don't have room for a lot of junk and filler food. I always try to limit sugar and gluten or wheat in general where I can, because wheat is not what it once was. It's not my grandparents' and great-grandparents' wheat. It's a different plant now. I got this at a Half Price Books, this Molly Katzen's Moosewood cookbook. I don't want super time-consuming prep stuff. I probably just won't eat if that were the case when it's just me by myself, because I'm just not all about sitting and eating and food prep. I'm not as interested in that as just doing something. Plus, I've been tired a lot lately, which I'm thinking is kind of an allergy deal. She doesn't have a lot of, well, first of all, I love this because it reads just like what she said she intended it for, with these little pictures, and it looks like handprint. It kind of makes me think of Isolde's Little Red and the City book. She wrote this for family and friends, and it has that feel to it. They're not, to me, very time consuming. Like the things I've tried so far were not too time consuming, and they were filling enough, because there's nothing worse than you want to do stuff with lots of veggies and each thing is really time consuming and it's just a side. It's enough for a little side. So you're making 3 time consuming things for a meal. I'm not interested in that. Or you're having to think how to change it and modify it. These are enough to be, like the entrees anyway, to make a meal that could fill someone. And I could always, they're actually all vegetarian recipes, but I'm not vegetarian. I mean, I mostly do eat vegetables. I don't eat a ton of meat, but my family members do like meat. So what I do is I have things on the side that they can also eat with it. Something easy that I can prepare and have available. But I've enjoyed what I've made so far. I think the next thing I'm going to do is the stuffed cabbage. These are each not super time consuming, and they also don't require ingredients that are difficult to find. Like, I'm looking here, and this is the first thing I've seen that I don't know if we have caraway seeds at the store. Probably we do, but I don't have access to a lot of the things. Like a big city, the stores you might have. If it calls for fancy ingredients, I'm going to have to modify, and that can be time consuming too, because it means mixing a few things together to make this and such seasoning, So anyway, this has helped. It's helped me to keep from just heating up, steaming a big bunch of veggies to sit down and eat plain with salt and pepper for a meal. That's been good. That's part of my kind of taking care of myself. But another aspect of self-care that I was thinking about, someone may have recommended several episodes back, Jenny Odell, who wrote The Art of Doing Nothing. I feel like one of you did recommend it at some point to me, but at the time I didn't read it. I haven't read it yet, but I will link the talk that I listened to and some maybe articles that I read of hers. But the thing I enjoyed about Jenny's talk that I heard at a conference was the way she was discussing choosing when to back away from influences like media, and also what is in it for us. Why are we so invested in social media? That wasn't really the point of her discussion, but it's what I took from it. She was talking kind of like Adina. She was overwhelmed after the last election. She had seen just the ugly side of people and things, and the way, our country was so divided, people were so polarized. and she found that she was withdrawing and spending more time at some parks local to her. And she realizes it's a privilege to have the time to even go sit for an hour or two at a park. A lot of people are just trying to get by. They don't have that kind of time. But she did have it with her job. And so she would go and sit and just be. And when she talks about this art of doing nothing, she describes that you need an architecture to allow you to do nothing, to explore it. And it's often like walls, say a walled garden, something that separates you from the other distractions of the world, kind of suspends you in space and time. She said labyrinths were known for that, mazes. They give you a sense of being separate and apart, and you could kind of get lost in it. And there's supposed to be I've never really been in a labyrinth, but there's supposed to be a kind of meditative quality to walking through it, even just spiraling gardens and things. So she found that, maybe accidentally, in these gardens around her, and she did what she calls deep listening, where you just are receptive to whatever comes to you. You're not necessarily filtering and looking for something. You're not making value judgments on everything. You just relax and take it in. And she noticed birds singing, and eventually she's noticing that if you wait long enough, you will see the bird making the sound. And she started putting various types of birds together with their call and learning more about them, bird watching basically. It was very soothing, and it actually fed her creative self. She would find she was going out of her way to walk past a KFC on her way home from work that had these certain birds behind it. And it was just comforting to see this natural world still going on with all the chaos happening in the human world around her. There's still this sense of calm and order in the natural world. And that's what she felt like we needed for our architecture of nothing. We had to get a little space to be removed from these distractions in the world around us. And she talks quite a bit about social media in general. And we needed to be grounded in nature. That was an important component to a richer life. So if you follow the link, I think you'll appreciate, if any of this resonates with you at all, I think you'll really appreciate what she has to say in the link. So she said at first, it was just hearing the sounds of birds, and then gradually she's seeing and noticing more, and things are sharpening and becoming more in focus for her in the natural world. But when she considered what is it that keeps us so connected to all these other distractions, that keeps us out of the natural world, she thought about these manufactured public spaces like Universal. As you get toward the edge of the property, I guess, of Universal, they have these cafes, and they're meant to look like open public spaces, but they still belong to Universal, and you have to follow a kind of conduct that they want, or they'll get rid of you. It's not actually a public space like a park. It's a faux public space, but it's part of this consumer culture of Universal. I don't know if I'm quite making this clear, but she said a lot of what we consider public spaces, they really aren't. They're part of our capitalist consumer culture. And so I thought about Instagram. What is it that keeps us so connected there that we can't back away if it's stressful? And I just found her thoughts on it really different. They aren't what I would have expected. And maybe I'm interpreting wrong. Maybe I didn't come away with the right ideas. I made a few notes. She said that the labor movement in the 80s, that ended in the 80s, when it began, the labor movement, they were fighting for no more than an 8-hour day. They wanted an 8-hour work day and then the freedom to do whatever. And when asked, what is it the labor movement wants? Samuel Gompers in 1886 said, what do we want? The earth and the fullness thereof. And she thought that was just a great answer. It includes that sense of grounding in nature, a fuller, richer life, but also it's not super defined. We just want whatever we want. We want the freedom to do whatever we need. It's not specified, and it doesn't say it has to be our version of productive. And this is one of the main points that she makes. We have such a push on productivity now, and I would argue that we've misplaced our values of what is actually productive in life and what isn't. She said that somewhere in the 80s, this is what she's read and believes, when the labor movement started to fizzle out, a neoliberal idea of everyone being an entrepreneur, a capitalist, life as entrepreneurship kind of came into focus. And it could be exciting, it could be really rewarding financially, it could also be really dangerous and risky. And the risks that used to just a few people would take on themselves, now everyone is seeing life as entrepreneurship, and they're taking it on themselves. And everything is this monetizable economic venture. Think about your time online, or people you might know, or maybe in the past you've felt like you had to brand yourself. Branding is part of that life as entrepreneurship. You hear companies, even small business owners, talk about branding, but you know a lot of people with no business to advertise on social media, they're still branding themselves. They want a cohesive, pleasing grid on their Instagram. That's seeing life as entrepreneurship. And the venture is worth it. It makes what we do toward the venture productive. Another thing she brought out is that the idea of technology, that it was going to save us time. You know, once we get the ability to work from home on computers, think of all we could get done quickly at home and then live our lives. But because life is entrepreneurship, everyone's competing, trying to make the most of their venture. It doesn't work that way. They all just work into the wee hours. We're always on call. I know my children will deal with this as adults, you know. And those of you who have a business online, especially if you're using social media to advertise your business, well, now you've got to get in touch with people all over the world up at different hours. It's your job to moderate comments on your site. That's a 24/7 thing. This idea that it's not worth it if it's not productive, what has that done to our natural spaces? Like this very park that she said she would go to and listen to the birds, she's said it was almost became condominiums at least once. It was seen as a threat or a wasted space. If it's not involved in consumerism, then it's either a threat or it's potential stuff to exploit for consumerism. The same with people. And we could also look at our thought life the same way. If we're not using it to somehow further our venture in life, our branding, our business, or our finances, you know, is it worthy? Is it getting the value it needs or the time it needs? So a lot of us don't back off of this constant media deluge that's coming at us because we feel we need to be on top of things and productive. We feel we need to be appearing and presenting ourselves a certain way online, maybe involved in of the moment things. And a lot of us don't even have a business to, you know, like we're just doing it because we're buying into a system. I don't know. I'm not using the best words to describe it, but when I put it together with the things I was thinking in the last few weeks, we get a bit addicted to the adrenaline rush of the conflict or the constant latest news, what's happening. We can get addicted to that, and it becomes our new norm. Whereas just that art of doing nothing, where we just sit and be and think, there are certain thoughts that won't come to you unless you are out being quiet in nature and doing that deep listening. And what would those thoughts, how would they change our life? How would they affect our life or our branding, you know? These were just good thoughts to me. We think if something's not producing, it could be. I often feel that conflict of, like, right now I'm not working. I might need to soon. And I totally understand that. I don't feel ready physically. I really want to get a handle on my hormonal junk. But I also just feel that pressure, like, if you're not producing in some way that our world values, with a paycheck or a status of some sort or a title or a role that's official, you're not producing. And it makes me think of this book I read, Woman at Home. I read it years ago when I was a mom, a stay-at-home mom with the kids. And I did get some flack at times from people who thought, you know, well, if you're not very intelligent, staying at home is good, you know, but you really ought to be using that brain otherwise. And I'm thinking, using it for what? Is that little paycheck, much of which would go to childcare, really so much better than what I'm investing in at home? And of course, it's fine if you work. I'm not saying one way is better than the other. But everyone knows that what we invest in relationships, in character, in nurturing, not just ourselves, but the world around us and the people around us, love. We invest in love. Super valuable. There's zero price tag to it. It gets very little value in this world, and it's just not seen as productive. And so life as entrepreneurship doesn't value that. And those thoughts have been on my mind a lot lately. Doing all this time bird watching, she started viewing herself through the eyes of a bird. How do these animals, how would I appear as a human? And it helped her just kind of get that removal from life to really step back and get perspective, which I think is also part of that architecture of nothingness, you know, how you make space to just do nothing and be and grow. And then she reminds her listeners that you're not doing nothing all the time. You're doing nothing for something. It's for a good purpose. So she's thinking of hashtags instead of "you only live once," you know, the necessity of missing out, NOMO. Sometimes you have to miss out. And she said that it can be an act of political warfare. It's very subversive at times to say, I'm not going to take part in this one. I can't do this. No more. I have to take care of myself and have this moment to just be. To be still long enough, really see who we are, where we are. And then she says it cultivates sensitivity. Like, we get online and do social media to connect with others, but these are really instant, fast connections. They don't really lead to a change. Like, sensitivity versus to connectivity. Your sensitivity is like, say, some of the conversations that knitters have been having on Instagram. They share their perspective and someone else gives another, and then there's a counter maybe, and then another, and it's awkward and at times it's uncomfortable and they may not end up agreeing, but overall many people have seen two sides to something or been altered in a good way. Often you come away with an understanding or even a good sense of pleasure. I'm so glad I had that connection with someone. That's a sensitivity kind of thing. But the connectivity that the internet is pushing, which is sort of like what Sarah Jane and Ada and A. Eastman were saying, is like a instantaneous quick thing. Well, if it can't be said verbally, preferably with texting language, it's not seen as valuable. It's not useful. So facial expressions, tone of voice, physical ways we extend ourselves to one another, they're not part of it, and they could be part of those conversations. They're actually very important ways that we connect with one another. They help us empathize or see someone's empathy. Those aren't part of it. And so, like we talked about in the last episode, this feeling removed from the people that we're speaking about or to. We don't have to see the effects of our words. We don't have to meter them out and consider it. We don't have to help them build them back up after they've been torn down. Maybe they needed to be. Maybe they needed to see the truth of their actions, but we don't have to support their family. We don't have to rebuild our community after tearing parts of it down. It's like a part of the responsibility that we just get to totally shirk through social media connections. We can. It's easier to do, I think, is her point. And I thought that was a neat way of looking at it too. An interesting way to consider how I connect with other people. How sensitive am I, or am I just connecting? So I want to be quiet. I say that an hour and a half into this, I want to be quiet more. But I usually am quiet, that's why my throat's all screwed up. I don't talk much. I just talk to you guys. I want to spend more time considering, which is a luxury. When I have it, I want to. I feel like this summer I'm going to have the time and I need to take it. I want to do everything I can to get my health straight, but to also look at my place in life and just be ready for the future. I'm not sure what that means, but I really want time to grow in character. And I don't know. I don't know what all that will mean. But if any of this rings true with you, if you found that you feel pulled toward this connectivity, but you don't actually feel that you're connecting with people, you actually feel disassociated as you do it, if you feel almost ashamed to not stay connected on top of your social media presence because there's something productive about it, or maybe even not social media aside, you feel that pull to constantly be productive, or you're wasting your time. Like it's a waste of time to just sit quietly and consider life. It's a waste of time to, do things that don't constantly earn money for life as entrepreneurship, I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. I sometimes feel that pull, that I'm not bringing in a paycheck and I'm not a caregiver anymore, so what am I doing? Is it useful? I'd personally like to be physically ready for whatever, but I don't judge other people that way. And I'm grateful that right now I'm not having to work, especially so I can get all this, hormone junk straightened out. But it wasn't always that way, and it may not always be that way. I totally get that. Even if we are busy and we have to spend a lot of our time earning a living, there might be ways that we can say, no, I'm going to just step out on this one. I don't have to be connected today. I can turn off my phone today. I need time for me. And she talks about self-care as an act of making a political statement. I'm putting caring for myself mentally or emotionally ahead of being part of this system. She's not really talking about taking a spa day. She's talking about not going along with the pressure to be on top of every event, every issue, every whatever, to worry so much about being on the right side of every issue, but to just step back and evaluate ourselves and just take some time to be. I wondered if you guys do that. Where is your place that you have as your architecture for nothing? Is it a physical place? She stresses being outdoors, grounded in nature. Maybe that's not as much a possibility. I know we talked about episodes back on the Slow Home podcast. They were saying sometimes people just sitting in a grassy median, that's all they've got, but it makes a difference to them, to their heart, for me, I go on long walks, and I usually walk down to the cemetery, and I have relatives, I walk past their graves. It's not a morbid thing at all. And then I make my way home. I also hide in my garden, especially as the plants start to grow up, and they are now. It's not that I don't want my neighbors to see me, but I just like to feel hidden, and it's the only way to do it, because there's people on both sides. I'll just go lay or sit in my garden and no one can see me. Sometimes not even my dogs, and I just feel totally alone. And I love that feeling out in nature. 2 questions for you. 1, if you have a pattern idea for Lori, who's getting over that carpal tunnel surgery, she needs something that would be gentle on her wrists. Please give her your recommendations in the comments. If you comment in the episode 33 thread of my Ravelry group for my so-called handmade life, you could link those patterns and make it really easy for her if you want. 2nd question, you can always comment on anything I've talked about, but what is your place? What is your architecture for doing nothing? And when I say do nothing, I don't necessarily mean knitting. Knitting isn't always doing nothing. As we discussed, the very culture around it, very consumer-like, and a lot of us have had to take breaks from it on Instagram, say. So this might be part of your doing nothing. I honestly feel like knitting those socks, I can do that kind of mindlessly, but we're talking about being grounded, maybe outdoors, letting the natural world kind of seep in. All the stuff around us, letting it help us see what's inside of us. I just wondered how you do it. And if you have more thoughts on that art of doing nothing. So I would really like to hear what you guys have to say about that. Next time I do it, I want to, maybe I'll take you on a walk. I don't know how I'll film while I'm walking. I'm not going to hold a selfie stick out in front of me. Maybe in my garden I'll do an episode. It'll have to be during the day when no one's watching me. All right, bye.